Hey Gainers, so welcome to episode 8, and we're going to talk about the murder of Mary Hogan. My name's Ashley, I'm the creator of Egg Gain in Colour, and I'm from the Isle of Wight. Gents, do you want to introduce yourselves?
I'm Jamie Phillips. I'm one of the admins of the Ed Gein in Color discussion group and colorization artist from South Carolina.
I'm Larry. I'm from Michigan, and I am one of the admins of the Ed Gein in Color discussion group.
Right, thank you, gents. So, I don't know how to approach this one, gents, with a lot of respect, obviously. Um, Jamie, do you want to briefly talk about Mary Hogan as a person?
Sure. Mary Hogan was born on November 19th of 1901 in Austria. Am I correct on that date?
Yeah.
Um, she was born in Austria, and I don't think they're actually sure of where exactly she was born in Austria. There's two faint names that pop up, but nobody's really sure where Mrs. Hogan was born. But she also spent a good chunk of her life in Chicago, located in Illinois, and not much is really known about her life. She had one daughter. I think Ashley, you know the name of her
uh,
daughter.
Christine, and she lived till she was 94, 96 years old.
That's amazing.
Mm.
And not much is unfortunately known about Mrs. Hogan. She seemed to be a very private person from what is known, but she ended up moving near a town in Plainfield, which I know Ashley knows the name because it just slipped my mind actually. My brain's a little scattered. I apologize.
Bancroft, was it?
Bancroft.
So,
It's about 10 minutes outside of Plainfield. Um, and that's where she ran a small little tavern. And on December 8th, 1954, she was had her life taken by Mr. Edward Gein in her tavern.
okay, and again, approach this one quite softly. Do you want to talk about the actual murder?
To the best of my ability, we can try. Not much is known about how that would have went down. There have been several depictions in the media. Typically, they're very inaccurate or very,
Have you got a couple of
what would be the
theories?
word? Well, I typically try to keep theories down, but I do know that usually when her death is predicted, it's done in a very sensationalized way. I'm talking to you, Netflix. Um, in real life, Ed would have went into the tavern apparently after closing hours, and she would have let him in because he wasn't a regular at her tavern. He had only been in maybe a couple of times, so he wasn't really well known in that tavern. But he had went in, and not much is known as to what happened. But at some point, he would have drew a Mauser pistol in 32 ACP and took her life there. And what happened afterwards is relatively unknown until apparently her remains were discovered in the farmhouse and later buried in an unmarked grave. And outside of that, not really much is known about Mrs. Hogan, unfortunately.
So, just going back to the pistol that was used, can you explain a little bit about that? Was
The pistol is either a 1914 Mauser pistol or a 1934. Both are very similar. It was likely the model 1934 because almost all of those were chambered in 32 ACP. It's a smaller cartridge, not particularly powerful at all. It's not a very common cartridge to see in modern day for the most part. It was mostly replaced by a more popular cartridge known as 380. But at that point, those pistols were sold as surplus, so it's something he likely purchased for a few dollars, and not much is known about what happened to it, whether it was taken into police custody, whether he sold it, got rid of it, etc. But the Mauser Model 1934 is the pistol that likely took Mrs. Hogan's life, but there has been some misconception at that, primarily with the 2000 film In the Light of the Moon, which primarily stars Steve Railsback playing Geen. The scene is played out mostly historically accurate from what we know, although he, in that film, is carrying a Mauser C96, which is an old German pistol, and which is something that Ed never owned and never used because the thing with the Model 34 or 1934 is that it was very concealable and was ideal for concealed carry. And when Ed went into the tavern, he would have just had it likely in a coat pocket. So what my guess is, the director probably read the report where it says Mauser pistol and just grabbed a C96, since when you say the word Mauser pistol, people typically think of the C96, but the C96 Ed Gein never owned, or there's no history of him ever even owning one.
Okay, so she was reported missing at first, wasn't she?
It's
Yeah, and it wasn't until 3 years later her remains were found at the farmhouse.
Yes, well, they, I think they did suspect Gein at first. I think there was reports that some people thought they saw his truck, the 1940 Chevy that he drove. But then again, those were more common back then, and a lot of trucks looked pretty similar at the time, so it could have been anybody's truck. And forensic evidence was nowhere near as advanced as it is now. I do know that a bloody coffee mug was found where it had been turned right side up, along with 32 ACP shell casings. Um, People thought it was a robbery gone wrong, which ended up kind of going into the theory that Mrs. Hogan was apparently involved in the mafia over in Chicago, which there is no evidence for. From what we know, that is just a bit of a media sensationalized theory that likely came up after the disappearance. Oh, the mafia must have got her, or she had this, or she was running away from some sort of past, which is very common in a lot of older cases where they will slap on some sort of odd thing that's kind of similar with Elizabeth Short, aka the Black Dahlia, where they tried to accuse her of being a sex worker. They always add these really odd things that the media does, but in reality, there's no evidence for Mrs. Hogan ever being involved in any sort of mafia or crime affiliated.
Okay, and just to ask you both, how do you think Mary Hogan should be remembered?
I think fondly, not much is known about her. She did have a daughter that lived to be nearly 100 years old, which is amazing. And I hope that the life she lived was a comfortable and a happy one. Um, I wish we knew more about Mrs. Hogan, but from what we know, only two photos of her exist to the public, and they're both extremely bad quality for the most part. There are some stories about Mrs. Hogan. She was described as being a little gruff, definitely what would be the word for someone like Mrs. Hogan? Definitely not one to be messed with or kind of cross. Definitely knew her way around and was well respected in that community.
Yeah, you
Unlike,
could use for the word you could use for her was probably more like eccentric.
yes, that could be a potential word. Um, a lot
Okay,
more is known about Mrs. Hogan or Mrs. Warden, though. Um, since when people think of the Ed Gein case, Mrs. Hogan is typically almost forgotten about, unfortunately, and most of it is focused upon Mrs. Warden due to the state that Mrs. Warden was found in and how that went in. Not really, like I was saying earlier, not really much is known about what happened to Mary Hogan. There was reports of her decapitated head being found in a bag, but like some experts had explained, it wouldn't have made sense for them to be even able to identify that if that was the case, especially back then. So it's unknown, but her remains would have been taken and buried
well,
in the unmarked grave with the others, which is unfortunate that Mrs. Hogan doesn't have a proper grave. And she's typically pretty forgotten about in this story. And with most of the media that's out there involving Gein, the Gein case, she's typically, I guess, misrepresented, which is pretty common with this whole case in general. It's a lot of sensationalization, and most of it's very downright disrespectful, which we've talked about in previous episodes.
just talking about the identification of the head. I forgot to mention that Deputy Sheriff Hank Sherman, um, he apparently ran the tavern for a little bit after her death or going missing. But he also helped find an X-ray to help identify a human head. I don't know how true this is.
Interesting.
Have you not heard this one before?
Not heard this one.
No. Well, we got a post up on the group with a picture of the chap. So if
Definitely
anyone
would be worthy of some more research on that one.
Okay, anything else to add, gents?
I just hope that we were able to shed some light on this because typically, even anytime you watch a documentary for the most part, or especially certain Netflix series, there's, as always, there's a lot of misrepresentation. A lot of it's done very inappropriately, and most of the time, these people still have family that are around. It's unclear as of yet whether Mrs. Hogan has any remaining family members. She was twice divorced, but I highly doubt any of those husbands are among alive anymore. So it is unfortunate. I wish there was a bit more representation when it came to Mary Hogan, but it's just, I think it's mostly due to the fact that she's a very unknown person in general, and most of her life was kept very private.
Yeah, I'll agree with Jamie on that. That she was very mysterious. A lot of any of the information on her is very mysterious. That's why I wish, like Jamie said, I wish there was more about her that we knew. But it's a very mysterious case, especially with Miss Hogan because of, I guess, whatever reason, a lot of the media inaccuracies and things. So, but yeah, I'm with Jamie on it. I wish there was more we could find out about her.
Yeah. Okay, well, we'll leave it there then, gents. Thank you for, it's really hard catching up, but I do appreciate everything. Jamie, do you want to see us out?
Of course. For all you that watched to the end, thank you. We appreciate your support. And on the next episode, we want to dive into the life of Mrs. Bernice Worden next, since there is quite a bit more known about Mrs. Worden. So we look forward to bringing that all out because it takes us a while to do these episodes because there's years and years worth of research from all of us combined, along with more people, to get all this as factual as possible for you to watch. But I do hope you all enjoyed watching and stay safe and be good to one another.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.